issues to do with the county. Thank you so much, Laura, for that report. Back in studio, I'm still here with Dr. Stanley Karanja, political strategist, Karanja Kabare, governance expert, Mary Mwangi, a political analyst, Odoyo Owidi, a political analyst, and Eustace Kinywa, electoral expert from ELOG. We continue discussing these issues to do with the IEBC. But surely, Mary, if you've seen the memo,
I have had a look at it, yes.
It means there were real issues.
There were major issues.
Even according to the Commission's own self-analysis, even before we wait for the judgment from the Supreme Court, the written judgment to give the ruling. But surely, what went wrong with this IEBC? They appear to have so much confidence when they declared the winner. It's like they knew exactly what they were doing. But right now, they don't even trust themselves. Yet we are expecting them to give us a credible election, which is even, according to the threshold that has been set by the Supreme Court, we will be demanding much more from them this time round.
You see, prior to the election, the IEBC promised us free, fair, valid elections, and that was the message they kept pushing. And so we believed them up until the point that the cracks started appearing when the transmission of the results became an issue. After the Supreme Court ruling, you now see a house that is in panic, in turmoil. They need to understand what is it that went wrong. I go back to the 21 days when we have to wait for this ruling. We need to understand what is the threshold of this ruling, because we're told X number of forms were invalid. X number of forms did not have watermarks, did not have serial numbers. So we want to know, in this new election, are we going to be told one invalid form, 34A or 34B, will lead to annulling the elections again? Or will it allow somebody to go back to court and challenge the results? So we're very, very uncomfortable as citizenry who lined up for hours waiting to see who would win. And so, as you can see from the gentleman in Kisumu who said he does not trust Chebukati, that is now, unfortunately, the court of public opinion that feels that way. And we need to be assured that we will have free, fair elections, that there will be no administrative anomalies, that we will not line up for nothing.
Yes, and probably one of those people or parties that should have been very much offended by IEBC's failure is probably Jubilee Party. I know they appear to have misplaced their wrath or anger after this declaration by the Supreme Court. They appear more angry at the Supreme Court, yet it is the IEBC that clearly has a problem, and the Supreme Court only pointed it out. Now that even the political players will clearly see that IEBC truly has a problem, where do we go from here? Because the problem has always been the politicians. Forget even about the general members of the public who already do not trust the IEBC. If the players in these coming elections do not trust the IEBC because of what is happening now, then which way forward?
Good way forward. We have a president in this country, His Excellency Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. Today, he should give us way forward. He should be able.
Yet he is a player also in this election.
No problem.
Yes.
He let them do it. He let Kenyans do. And there are two scenarios we need to look at. During August 8 elections, what happened? Kenyans came out to vote. The process going to the voting, the international observers, local observers, they all said it was good. I was there. I voted. The process up to voting was well. Kenyans were happy. They've done a good job.
A section of Kenyans were happy.
Kenyans were happy. They have done the voting. Kenyans. And I will say this one, all Kenyans. We voted and we were happy. And that's why Jubilee also was wondering why. Why will the Supreme Court declare invalidity of this election? Yet Kenyans, they went and voted. But where did we go wrong? From after we left the polling station, the IEBC processes of counting, tallying, transmission, and that's all in that letter that you have in the Muli. It's all in that letter. Now, this is where IEBC, who are also Kenyans, IEBC, who are the people who are putting us in this mess? And this is where, back again as Kenyans, wherever we are, we can also blame ourselves. Because of our culture of things, our belief system, our value system, we need to question ourselves as a country. Because even these 40,883 presiding officers were Kenyans. Why did they have to do all manners of these things that Chebukati is bringing out in the IEBC systems? Why is 290 returning officers who are Kenyans again? Where did we go wrong in our value system as a country? Now we are putting our own country into jeopardy. And this is where we have two ways of looking at it. As Kenyans, we need now to start behaving. We need to be people of value systems. Second, if you are given an opportunity in any organization or any commission, please do your job very well. And that's where we will be able to go forward. This is what we are suffering. Even come to corruption. We talk about mega corruptions. But somebody, somewhere, handled a document of original entry. He signed. He released the money. That is the person who needs to be dealt with perpendicularly. Right now, people are talking about Chebukati. Chebukati, yes, is the leader. That's what I was talking about. Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. Yes. As the president, we have one head. Needs to guide us and need to be very firm on the leadership one way forward. Chebukati as well, as he is trying, though there are many challenges, needs to take control and promise Kenyans, if I'm going to do this, not writing these letters is writing inside there.
Let's be fair to Chebukati, because this was, and I think when Odoyo Widi mentioned it, this was intended to be confidential. In fact, it has a stamp confidential. It was only this is internal communication. Before this, he did not come out publicly and announce to the country that these are the problems we've been having. He asked the questions internally. It's only that it was leaked.
Thank you. Values again. You're inside an organization. You have a document you're clearing yourself. In this country, let's have respect to management, to supervision. Internal things, they remain internal. It's like, that's why we have self-contained houses. You do whatever you're doing inside your house. Don't spill it to the public. This is another thing. Value system in our country, we are suffering. And this is where Chebukati needs now very fast sit down with commissioners. They agree. This is our strategy to deliver. 2017 on 17th of October. And then he comes to Kenyans. We will do 1, 2, 3 things, and we'll be able, so that the public can be able to appreciate.
And we do understand that there will be a plenary meeting, another plenary meeting of the IEBC today. Our reporter Sam Gituku is on that story, and in a short while probably will be heading to the anniversary towers for an update from him. But Bwana Karanja Kabare, looking at it through the political lens, of course, Jubilee's frustration, the president's frustration at the judgment by the Supreme Court looked very much like it was going to form the larger part of the campaign agenda going into this repeat elections. But now we seem to, according to this letter that has been leaked, we seem to be saying that the Supreme Court was actually right in making that judgment, that if at all these things, and this is from an IEBC self-analysis, even before the Supreme Court tells us what was really wrong and what informed their judgment. Do you think Jubilee now needs to change strategy and stop castigating the courts?
Very well, Fred. I think before I answer that, if you remember the ongoings when at the bombers of Kenya, the signs were there. IEBC would say we'll be having a press conference at this time, and then there's some delays and so forth. At least you could tell something is amiss. The statements that were made from the opposition side, we have gotten this information from IEBC. We have insiders in the IEBC who has given us this information. We got this from IEBC servers. The point I'm making is, IEBC has so far given the indication that is divided between the two sides. And that is why you fear, depending on where you're coming from. There are those who say, well, we want elections now. The others would say, yes, we need elections, but not with the IEBC. Immediately after the ruling, yes, the Jubilee side was quite annoyed for obvious reasons. But you begin to see some kind of strategies being put in place. Of course, the first 2 days, the president hit the road. and there was so much very interesting reactions to the statements or the kind of words he had for the court. But what have you seen in the last 2 days? Remember the Western leaders who paid him a visit. You have seen what Musila has done. The behind-the-scenes machinery has gotten to work, and the rhetoric against the IEBC has more or less stabilized, and I hope it goes down. Of course, there are few cases we are hearing, I don't want to mention names, but which are not helpful. They are coming from the Jubilee side, but they are not helpful for Jubilee. Remember, there are votes that you are seeking from the other side, the agitated side. So you must measure your words carefully, so that you can make the work of these people who are volunteering to help the president capture votes elsewhere easier and to make it fruitful.
Yes.
So I think the castigation of the Supreme Court is slowing down. We are coming to reality. There is work to be done, friend. And we don't have much time on our side.
Because of course, it appeared like, yes, Jubilee would have continued insisting that, yes, our victory was robbed from us by the Supreme Court. But just reading this letter, which is not even from the Supreme Court, that clearly has to change.
Fred, I think in Kenya we are sugarcoating things too much. I need to raise the temperature of this meeting here now. We are not saying things as they are. In this election rigging, Jubilee is the first culprit even before IEBC. The truth of the matter is the pressure that was being put on IEBC for these things to be done. How the pressure was put, I may not know now, but it must have come from Jubilee. The beneficiary of all this was actually Jubilee. We are pretending too much. That is why in Kenya we call tribal bases strongholds. Those are not strongholds, they are tribal bases. You can call Mombasa stronghold, but not Nyeri for Uhuru, not Kisumu for Raila. Those are tribal bases. Let's call a spade a spade. You remember when NASA announced that they are going to court, the first thing that happened, 3 top lawyers from Jubilee were sent to a program run by, I think, Citizen, the one that Jeff runs, whatever it is called. And they tried to run this narrative that NASA will have to come and prove that 1.4 million votes were stolen. They were trying to redirect. They're trying to give the Supreme Court a cue of what to look for, when the Constitution is very clear that an election must be verifiable. Just that is enough. It must be credible. That is enough to annul an election because it is not going according to the Constitution. So when you find one single form that is not in conformity with what we expected the IEBC to use, that is enough to show that the election was interfered with, and that is enough to nullify the election. We need to set the standards high enough so that we have elections that are credible in this country in the future. When we talk about this leaked memo, and we keep on going round, why was it leaked? This memo must have been leaked by the insider of Jubilee, of IEBC, so that they can get a political help from outside. Look, we are being caught here. Have this memo, now deal with it. Because you remember, first 3 commissioners abandoned Chebukati. Today we are hearing they are moving to 5. Somebody is inducing them. Yes. Because Chebukati does not need to consult the other commissioners when he's doing administrative duties in the office. He can't call every meeting when he wants to call an officer, when he wants to ask an officer to account for his actions. So this thing of we were not consulted should not even arise, because this guy signed this letter as Chebukati, not as the commission. So we must stop this idea of sugarcoating things, covering rot. We must say things as they are so that we save Kenya for future messes like this, because we are heading to a constitutional crisis in this country. Yes. Suppose we push this guy to resign, and the president does not have the power today to appoint new ones. What are we going to do?
And that's a big question, and I'll be asking my panelists to answer that. We also do understand that Raila Odinga, the NASA presidential candidate, will be making an address from the Okoa Kenya Secretariat offices here in Nairobi. We'll be heading there in a short while once that kicks off. But coming back to Eustace Kinyua, as an electoral expert, if you've gone through this list of about 12 questions that Wafula Chebukati is seeking answers to from the CEO of IEBC, Ezra Chiloba. Do you think that these things, 12 of them, they can be able to be sorted out in the next 38 days, and we have a credible election, the kind as prescribed by the Supreme Court, because the word strict conformity to the Constitution. Do you think we can be able to sort out all these problems? Remember, IEBC right now is a house divided. Chebukati only has 2 commissioners on his side. So the Secretariat, he doesn't have them. He's trying to get a different team to run the elections. Do you think these 12 questions can be answered and we still be able to have a proper election?
My immediate answer to that kind of a question would be, I would be very skeptical to think those questions can be answered at once. But let's also remember, Chebukati gave a date, informed by all these things that were lingering in his mind. He had those questions far before he made that date decision. So we need to start from a point whereby we think, or we want to make presumption that he is well informed of what is in front of him. And he has made those decisions knowing that these answers are supposed to be given on a particular timeline. What we need to be asking ourselves as Kenyans, because I don't want to get or to dwell into what was leaked, because we might get into that today, talk about it, and in the next 30 minutes when he speaks, he disowns the document. We don't want to get into that kind of a situation. So let's first of all look at what my brother Odea said here. There are so many questions that we need to answer as Kenyans, and they only touch into institutions that we purport to be building, yet we are building individuals. Let's one day just close our eyes and assume there's no Uhuru Kenyatta and there's no Raila Odinga. We have another candidate. You can mention whoever you want to put into that picture. What would happen in a situation whereby we have a standstill like the one we're having today, and we have no institutions or structures to be able to safeguard the country? Do you see us going to the Burundi way? It's very possible. Right now, one thing Kenyans need to understand is that the Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta families are friends. That's why today you see them fighting on the political grounds. Tomorrow they shake hands because they are friends in other quarters. Let's get into a situation whereby these two people don't see eye to eye. What will happen in that regard? So we need to start asking those candid questions and be able to look at it inwardly. And then we'll start appreciating why we need to have institutions that are strong. Chebukati is doing things in-house, which he has a right to. We've mandated him to do that. So when he asks the questions, we don't have to go leaking the information that is leaked out. He will give us the information that needs to go to the public. Then we respect those boundaries. We'll be able to have institutions that can be said to be independent. Right now, what we are having is politicians setting the pace for the IEBC. What is Chebukati trying to answer? We don't want those names. Chebukati brings the list of names. We don't want that date. Chebukati starts getting worried. We cannot have a commission that is guided if we are going to continue giving them false stats and then we expect them to perform miracles. This is where we are getting wrong.
We do understand that in a few minutes, in the next few minutes, Bwana Raila Odinga will be addressing a media briefing from the Okoa Secretariat, Okoa Kenya Secretariat. Let's now link up with our reporter from that end, Macharia Gashuru, for an update. A very good morning to you, Macharia. What can you tell us from where you are?
Very good morning to you, Fred, and we coming to you live from the Okoa Kenya offices here in Nairobi, and we're expecting Raila Odinga, the NASA principal presidential candidate, to address a media conference this morning. And among the issues that we're expecting maybe Raila Odinga will be speaking about is the intrigues that are happening at the IEBC. Remember, yesterday Raila Odinga and Musalia Mudavadi had a press conference at the same venue, and they talked about the letter that has been alleged to have been, or rather a memo that has been alleged to have been written by the IEBC chair, that is Wafula Chebukati, to CEO Ezra Chiroba. And Raila yesterday speaking here he said that the memo now reveals what NASA had taken to the Supreme Court and what NASA has been insisting, and he insisted that NASA will not go into the polls until some of the issues that they've been raising have been addressed. And of course, he touched some of the issues that this letter, or rather this memo, has touched, including the fact that Chebukati has required Chiloba to explain a few issues in regard to the 8th of August polls. And of course, he said they will still insist on changes at IEBC if indeed they will participate in the 17th October polls, claiming that President Uhuru Kenyatta should not defend what actually happened during the 8th of August polls. And this morning we're expecting maybe to hear what is the next plan of action in terms of what NASA will be doing. Remember, they have a rally that has been slated for this afternoon, or rather later in the day, in Machakos County. So we're expecting to see if rather what the plan that NASA coalition has, and from the information that we have, we expect the principles, that is the 4 principles from this coalition, to address the media conference. And of course, we'll also be looking into if they are ready to meet with the IEBC. Remember, a few days there has been a meeting that was slated to happen the day before yesterday. The meeting never happened. That was the meeting before NASA principals and the IEBC. Another meeting with the 3 participants, that is the Jubilee coalition, or rather the Jubilee party, the NASA coalition, and of course the IEBC, never happened yesterday, with the Jubilee brigade claiming that they will only attend to this meeting if the NASA, or rather if their NASA counterpart will be in that meeting. So these are some of the issues that we're expecting, Fred, to be addressed by Raila Odinga, and of course the other principals here at the Okoa Kenya offices. Fred.
Thank you, Macharia Gashuru, there live from the Okoa Kenya offices in Nairobi, where we do expect that Raila Odinga, the NASA presidential candidate, will be addressing a media conference from there in a short while. And once that happens, we'll be heading there to listen into that. Back in studio, we're here with my panelists, and the big question now is, yesterday, as Macharia Gashuru rightly put it, Raila Odinga and Musalia Mudavadi indicated that they are not willing to take part in these polls given these new revelations. Now we are already precipitating a crisis. Whatever is coming from the IEBC is enough fodder for politicians to actually say, no, we will not take part in these elections. And what happens if we do not go for elections on October 17th?
First, let me refer to my fellow panelists' comments. They threw in the spanner in the works, in that politicians have been influencing the electoral process in this nation, and this has to come to an end, because people need to understand that when they have that one vote, that vote counts for something. What we're seeing in this memo is a situation where administrative issues in the IEBC have been so terribly managed that even down to the constituency and poll station level, individuals use false gaps, people did not send the information via the phones, that there was hacking in the system. How does this happen? The IEBC trained individuals to run this election. That is the understanding we had as voters when we went to the polls. So now we are headed to a situation where we may not go to the polls in the period that we're supposed to go into the polls. And by the end of October, we may end up with a constitutional crisis.
And that is looking very likely now, that we may not be able to go for these elections given the kind of timeline we're looking at, the issues afflicting the IEBC, whatever comments are coming from the political class or the 2 players that we expect to take part in these elections. Then what happens if at all we are not able to go to elections by the end of October?
Good question, which now puts not only the political side, because in our Vision 2030, as we envision, as panelists are discussing here, we are all Kenyans, and this, we are with it. We have the political pillar, which has been highly mismanaged, and people taking this as they have taken this one for granted. And all this started during nominations, party nominations. People did their funny things. Kenyans said we will wait for the IEBC elections, and that's why you saw even there were so many independent candidates who believed there will be fairness, and they invested. Kenyans invested. Remember, we were 15,000 Kenyans who went for these polls, only to get 2,000 around there, to not to the exact figure. But just imagine the investment Kenyans put into the politics. Then all of it, with the body that they trusted. Now it has gone down the drain. It's a big question because it does not only affect political pillar, it affects our social pillar. How are we going to live now? Who messed this? Everybody is coming, is going to get too sensitive. And it has really killed the economic pillar. What are we, nobody's going to invest. Yesterday was even better than today. When such questions we are discussing, what will happen? What if Chibukati resigns? What will happen? What if now Raila will not accept going for the elections? What will happen? Now, all these questions, what will Jubilee react? Because we also now, good question you had asked previously, now Jubilee having had the issue of the process, the psychological process that goes on, of you receive the information, you get into rejection and denial, how comes? Then you now start getting information before you reconcile with the information that now really, it was not the Supreme Court which had a problem. It is really this IEBC which has issues. Now, there is furthermore we are expecting, and yet we are on a period where the president has not these powers to have another person. Now, where do we go? That's the big question that each Kenyan must be able to know.
Because even the Constitution does not provide for this. What happens if we do not go for the election by the end of October, Agora Karanja?
Well, I don't think I have an answer for that.
no one
It is a constitutional crisis that I can't even begin to contemplate. But I want to follow up on Bona Odoi. If you look at the politicians control this political space, and this has been going on since independence. You look carefully and see the political space in Kenya is controlled by families who are less than the 5 fingers on the hand. Since independence, politics oscillates around them. We have gone through a process, the single party system, the multi-party and so forth. And of course now we have the new constitution, the devolution and so forth. What I'm seeing is labor pains of a birth that is about to happen. I don't want that constitutional crisis we might face to be the birth.
Yet some people may claim that yes, some political players are keen on that constitutional crisis actually happening. That probably that's what they want. We may be seeing probably from us members of the public, we are more concerned and worried, but maybe the political class are like, yes, that's exactly what we were hoping for.
Fred, you don't have to say a political class, because you are also doing some sugarcoating. The only person who can benefit from such a crisis is the incumbent. Let's face it. But going back to something more,
how will he benefit from that?
Because he's on the seat. If we can't go for elections, we can't elect a new leader, he's on the seat. In the worst case scenario, that the president is unable to discharge his duties, incapacitated by whatever means, the only other person that can come in is maybe the deputy or the speaker of the National Assembly. All these are his cronies. All these are purely Jubilee. So they are the only ones who can benefit from this. But when you go back to look for means and ways of solving our problems, you must remember, as a political scientist, we use events and actions of politicians to predict what these people are up to. So when you look at the events we have had, before the elections, I remember Jubilee used to say NASA should give us space. If they will have a problem, they can go to court. But today, Jubilee has come out, even rejecting very junior officers in IEBC. This tells us that they have profiled every employee of IEBC and know this is so-and-so, he comes from here, he could possibly not be our man. The very Chebukati they embraced very closely is now a rejection to them. It means they know more than we do. And remember, due to incumbency, they are capable of monitoring everyone, what they do, anytime, anywhere. But we keep on pretending that systems we have in our country work in the good faith of this country. They don't. They work for the people who control them. So we must accept these things, but we must see the bigger problem. We have seen children in Kisumu crying tears, because children as young as 6, because Uhuru Kenyatta has won. And we have seen now children in Nyeri wailing because the court has annulled Uhuru's victory. If children are doing all this, where do they get this information? Kenya is getting divided beyond redemption. We must learn now to share Kenya. We must learn now to let others also reign. You remember what happened when Jaramogi brought in something called Ford? Matiba refused to let it be. And that was a man who was going to die maybe 3 or 4, 5 years from the way he was getting. We could have had Moi removed much earlier, but self-interest. Today we have people who must remain in power whatever cost. Whether people die, whether the country goes into a crisis, they must remain in power. So it's a time that we started also thinking as citizens, ways of reducing the powers of the presidency, so that it doesn't become a very high-stakes game, that some people must lie on their own blood.
And that's a long-term solution, but we're looking at very short-term problems. So we are faced with a real crisis in the next about 40, 45 days or so. If we do not go into an election, we have a big problem. As an electoral expert, looking at IEBC, they don't look like they are able to conduct the kind of election as prescribed by the Supreme Court judgment. The threshold was very high. With the kind of problems bedeviling the Commission right now, they don't look, even if we go to the elections, we are not as optimistic that they can deliver that kind of election. What other options do we have? Because yes, if they fail to carry out a credible election, we might just need to go back to court again. But what other option do we have before these elections?
I think that's a very good question, and that's a very important question to be asked at this juncture in our country. Kenyans, we need to be alive to the fact that we've gone to the courts, they have done their part. We as a country also need to do our part. There is one thing that we always forget, and I think as ELOG we've also been talking about this, about communication. There is value in dialogue. There is a very important value in dialogue. Kenyans from both sides, he has used a very good example, children that cried in Kisumu when NASA lost, and children that cried in Neri when Uhuru lost in court. That's already a fabric, a society fabric that is already being eroded due to the kind of environment we've placed in this country. So when I say we need to embrace dialogue, it's nowhere in the legal structures that we are talking about, or legal. IEBC has even tried to quote 2013 that informed them to have 2 candidates. We are not even asking that question about what happens to the other candidates, the 8 of them. What if they wait until 16 and go to court, and then we are stopped from having the election? Has anybody thought about that? Or we are looking at Raila has said he doesn't want the team. Uhuru has said that small team is not good. Nobody is talking about Dida. Nobody is talking about these other presidential candidates. Yet we are very alive to the fact that the ruling that Mr. Chebukati used to inform the decision he made was from the 2013 decision. Who says after the 21 days the court will not have gone a different way from what was there in 2013. So we are getting into an environment that is very confusing, and we need to start embracing dialogue. So we need to have dialogue, even dialogue. And I think there is already a direction into that regard. Mr. Raila said the other day, IEBC need to bring them into a table, all of them, all the players. And even Jubilee indicated that. Yes. And this thing of calling one and leaving the other, or calling 2 and leaving the other, is not right. This is the time we bring the country into a boardroom. Let's discuss what is ailing us. Then from there, whatever comes out of that, let it be in record. This is what we've done. There were issues with this position, there were issues with this position, and then we move forward, building the structures that we want to see in the future. Otherwise, I don't think what happens after this, you cannot say that Uhuru is going to benefit. If it's a constitutional crisis, it's a constitutional crisis. Uhuru has no powers, he is going to be a very weak president. So nobody is going to benefit in that kind of a crisis. Wow. We must talk. Time now for a break. When we come back, we continue discussing the issues bedeviling the IEBC, as well as the campaigns which are already going on